Welcome to Hive Mind. This is Edge with my co-host Speaker. What's up, Speaker?
I'm good. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. Just trying to stay focused, centered, grounded. It's hard in this upside down world.
It is hard at the moment. I think a lot of people are taking breaks and doing their own things, but that's okay. I think we all need that at this point in time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I came across this and thought it was interesting, so I sent it over to you, and you were like, "Whoa, we have got to do a video on this." So
Yeah,
here we are.
I like this topic. And before we start, sorry, this one might be a little bit delayed. We've been having audio issues, and in case you hear it, we're sorry. It's all Edge's fault. You can blame her.
What?
You can send all your hateful comments and emails to Edge has a shit audio setup at protonmail.com.
Nice.
You're right.
So here we are. We're diving into some old declassified CIA documents today, all about the gateway process. So, and the reason why I came across this is if you'll go over to the next tab, Speaker. It recently was sort of rediscovered and went viral on TikTok last month. So, but the CIA commissioned this Army study on what's known as the gateway process. And this was done back in 1983. And these documents were quietly declassified and went largely unnoticed by the general population, but recently gained some new attention, went viral on TikTok last month because of the things that they're talking about.
Which is surprising.
Study.
Which is surprising because, TikTok and all. But every now and then you find some good gems on TikTok that's not just like a complete vapid platform. There is actually some okay creators on there talking about some interesting things.
Yeah, and this has been discovered and talked about throughout the years since it was declassified on and off and gotten new eyes on it, new attention to it. I had actually never heard of it until just recently with this new kind of rediscovery of it. Thought it was really interesting, the things that they're talking about in here. And yeah, worth at least talking about to get what the listeners think. So we're going to get into these CIA documents and give our thoughts, and then we'll just pass it on to you, the listeners, and ask what you think. I mean, do you think the conclusions from this study have merit, or do you think that it's just a bunch of nonsense? What do you think about the CIA commissioning a study like this, and what do you think the implications are of it?
Okay.
So
let's first kind of broadly branch out what the gateway process is and what it kind of entails, which is a lot of things that you see in this new age movement that has sprung up over the last, say, 10 years, which is astral projection. It goes into lucid dreaming, remote viewing is another thing. So those are the topics that the CIA actually commissioned people to research and dive into. Now, I've got my own theory and reasons why the CIA would want to touch this, and it's definitely not for global consciousness awakening in a positive way. The CIA
not at all.
wanted to use this as a weapon. Let's first get that out of the way.
But what's interesting is the CIA obviously found some legitimacy to it, or at least wanted to find out if there was legitimacy to it. And that's what this report is all about, is to find out if this method, known as the gateway process, has any legitimacy to it, has any merit to it, and if it can be used for military and intelligence purposes. So if you want to head over to the documents, it starts here with a letter, an opening letter. This report was submitted by U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Wayne McDonnell, and on their findings following a scientific study of what's referred to as the gateway process and its potential applications for the intelligence community. And the findings in this report are pretty mind-blowing when you get into it. The gateway process, as you had talked about, it's a training program, and it was designed by the Monroe Institute to, as you said, to expand human consciousness outside of the confines of time and space, to explore out-of-body experiences, observe past and present events, remote view, manifest intention into physical reality, heal the body, and a lot more. So these are all things that the training claimed to do. And this scientific study that the Army was commissioned by the CIA to do was done to find if there was any validity to these claims and if they could apply them to the intelligence community. Now, full disclosure, I personally have not gone through the gateway training. I can't endorse it in any way. I don't personally know if any of it works. We're just reading from this report and giving our thoughts on it. So, but it starts out on pages 1 through 5. It starts out by kind of explaining some of the methods they use in the training and why these methods are used and how they're similar to other methods that are really common knowledge, like hypnosis and transcendental meditation and biofeedback. And it talks about the importance of putting the body and mind in a state of just complete relaxation, where the left and the right sides of the brain, as well as the heart, are in total synchronization.
And this process is called hemisync.
Yes. And so it explains how the gateway training process is designed to enhance the mind and body synchronization using elements of those methods, but also it goes on to explain how the left hemisphere of the brain is the self-cognitive, the verbal, the linear reasoning. I kind of think of it as like the logical side of the brain that has a control of most of your awake day-to-day functions and decision-making. And how the right side of the brain, which is the more passive side, it controls the nonverbal, the imaginative, emotional, the intuitive side of our brains. So
A good way to look at it is like the left is the adult and the right is the child.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so the right side of the brain tends to accept whatever the left side of the brain kind of instructs it to do. And the idea behind this training is to relax the control that the left side of the brain has over the right side and to enhance the abilities of the right side of the brain so that both sides of the brain are working actually in harmony. And they refer to this, as you had mentioned, to hemisync, or that's just a short way of saying brain hemisphere synchronization. So on page 7, it starts kind of talking about the vibrational frequencies that the brain emits. And I think we have a graphic of brain frequencies and different states of awareness. So yeah. Okay, so your brain actually emits frequencies at different hertz. They're measured in hertz based off of its level of consciousness. So when you're awake, you're working, you're busy, that your brain's actually in beta and it's emitting 14 to 30 hertz. And then there's alpha, and that's kind of more relaxed, and you're imagining, you're daydreaming, you're self-introspective, and all of that. That's the alpha state. And then there's theta, and that is when you're kind of in that between awake and asleep state, or you're in deep meditation and a lot of flow of ideas are coming and creativity, and it's an altered state of consciousness. That's between 4 and 8 hertz. So I think that the ideal range that they're looking for the mind to get in is in that theta state.
Yeah. So has anybody I don't know if you've ever played sports or you're doing something that you really love or care about. The sports term is flow or in the zone. So do you know when you're like when you watch a basketball game or a football game and there's a player that is just doing amazing things? The term used for that is the zone. He's just hitting every shot. He's just moving. He's in an altered state. And as an artist, a lot of times I feel like I'm in a theta state, as in when I'm drawing or I'm creating or I'm just making anything, whether it's digitally or what. I find that time kind of becomes irrelevant. It works for me instead of against me, if you know what I mean. So a theta state's a very powerful state.
It is a very powerful state. It talks about that actually. So the method is for the subject to get into that theta brainwave state in that 4 to 8 hertz range, and using different vibrational frequencies that are emitted through headphones. And one vibrational frequency in the left ear is different from the right ear. And by doing that, it gets the left and right brain's vibrational frequencies to start to match and synchronize and harmonize. So it's just basically helping that brain, left-right brain synchronization move along more efficiently, I suppose, is a way of putting it. But people do listen to binaural beats, and this is kind of something that I would think is sort of common knowledge, but this is a very specific way of doing different vibrational frequencies in the left and right ear to achieve a synchronization between your left and right side of the brain.
It's binaural beats has become quite popular now. Like I said, a lot of this stuff has been, in a way, hijacked by the New Age movement. These things that have been, these ideas and concepts are things that have been used throughout history, from the Egyptians to even prior to that. Definitely the minds of the Aztecs would, have used this state of consciousness for whatever reason. But I think a kind of downside to that is that, yes, it has been hijacked by this New Age movement that has turned it into sort of commercialized, but to a point where they're not doing things properly. They're either doing it for financial gain or, like one of the videos that I watched before explains that a lot of these binaural beat videos that you're seeing now are not actually doing it right.
Right, or we're not listening to it right, like with the stereo headphones, which actually is what you need to achieve this sort of brain synchronization with the specific tones that they're using to do that. So yeah, there's a lot out there, and it's hard to determine what's legit and what's not. And again, I'm not passing judgment on this. I'm just kind of reading off of it and then passing it on to you as the listeners to decide what you think of this, and if you think it has merit or if you think it's a bunch of nonsense. It's fine either way. We're just, interested in your comments. But going back to the report, it talks about not just synchronizing the left and right side of the brain, but also how important it is to synchronize the heartbeat, because the heartbeat also emits a vibrational frequency in different states of activity. So like when you're exercising, obviously your heartbeat's moving more quickly, and when you're resting, it's moving more calmly and slowly. So the training is about getting the body in a state of complete relaxation where the heart rate is slowed down and the frequency of the heart rate harmonizes with that of the brain and the rest of the body. I think we're on page 8-ish or so. And so if you just think about the tuning of a tuning fork and how it emits a vibrational frequency that instruments are tuned to harmonize with, just apply that concept to the human heart, brain, and body. And when it's in this fully relaxed state and fully synchronized, the human body acts as a tuning fork, and it emits this vibrational frequency into the Earth's ionosphere in this range of about 6.8 to 7.5 hertz. And this frequency is in the same range as the fundamental frequency that the Earth itself emits, because the Earth also emits a vibrational frequency. And so it's harmonizing with it. And so in this relaxed and synchronized state, the wavelengths of the human body that it produces are very long and powerful, meaning they can go around 40,000 kilometers or practically around the perimeter of the Earth and penetrate metal, concrete, and water. So this report notes that this sort of state of the human body and relaxation and synchronization, that it's an ideal medium for, quote, conveying telepathic signal, which is pretty jaw-dropping when you think about it.
Hmm.
And then page 9 of the report, it goes on to talk about matter, energy, and consciousness. So it kind of explains how the entire universe is made up of energy. And we've talked about this before in our podcast that we did on Tesla. We can leave a link in the description if you guys want to watch that. But we specifically talked about this quote in particular by Tesla. I think we actually have a picture up for it. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. If you wish to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So Tesla knew long ago that the entire universe is, and all the matter in this three-dimensional reality is just energy, vibration. It's energy vibrating at different frequencies. So to visualize this, think about like the molecules inside of all solids, all liquids, and all gases. And how those molecules, they're vibrating at different frequencies. And it's that vibration or that movement of those molecules that characterize those different substances and differentiate those different forms of matter in the universe. So you just kind of expand that concept to everything. And you realize that everything in the universe, from the greatest galaxy to the smallest atom, everything is made of energy vibrating at various frequencies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the thing with Tesla, he was so far ahead of the game in this, and other scientists, professionals, intellectuals at the time knew this. Knew this. They all gave Tesla great praise. And another quote that we don't have up here that Tesla said, he also said, the day science begins to study the non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than all of the previous centuries in existence.
Exactly. And this report is definitely talking about all of those non-physical phenomenon. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. And we haven't even really gotten into the crazy stuff yet.
We haven't even gotten the meat. This is not even a
I know.
podcast. This is just a standalone vid. We're just getting into it.
So the report talks about how energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting and expanding at certain frequencies in a three-dimensional mode that creates a hologram. I think this is on page 9. If you'll go up, you'll see the hologram part.
Sorry, I'm way ahead
That's
of you.
okay.
No, there's no hologram here.
Yeah, holograms. Yeah, there it
Oh,
is.
yeah,
Yeah.
there we go.
So essentially, this report is saying that the universe as we know it is a projection or a hologram of reality. And that kind of brings that a whole new meaning to that analogy that we always like to use about how we're inside the matrix and we're trying to break out the matrix. So it's interesting. But
This topic fascinates me. It's something that I've delved into a lot over the years and have had success in some aspects and not in others. So it is definitely something I uh, would like to focus more on, I think.
yeah, this is a really fascinating topic. And it even talks about the matrix, I think, on the next page, page 10. It goes into, it talks about the consciousness matrix. And it explains how the gateway process alters the state of consciousness so that the human mind can perceive vibrational frequencies in the universe that we wouldn't otherwise be able to perceive using our five senses. It's kind of like a sixth sense, basically.
So like a sixth, like how dogs can hear things that we can't. Is that kind of?
Yeah, exactly. And so now's where we get into the really crazy stuff. It starts on page 13.
Oh, let's get down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, it actually makes an Alice in Wonderland um, reference at one point. I forgot what page that's on, but
Yeah, well, they refer to this process as kind of through the looking glass, or the Alice in Wonderland sort of
mm-hmm,
syndrome,
mm-hmm.
which it's easy to relate to that because it is very fantastical in
I
its.
love this though. Look on page on number 18, right where you're at, time, space, dimension, right there. Don't move. It says, up to this point, our discussion of the gateway process has been relatively simple and easy to follow. Now the fun begins. So now you know you're getting into the kind of crazy stuff. But in this section, it talks about how human consciousness can transcend time and space. And it explains how time is simply a construct of the measurement of force and motion. So, a way to think about this is like think about how we measure a day. That's just the measurement of force spinning the earth in one rotation. Or a year is the measurement of force moving the earth in one revolution around the sun. Okay. But it goes on to explain how energy is infinite and it's a force without limitations. Think about Einstein's quote for a second. I think we actually have a graphic of that quote from Einstein. Move over one picture, I think. Yeah, there it is. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from one form to another. That's the first law of thermodynamics. But that's what they're talking about basically here is how and energy is infinite, it's without limitations, and therefore it lives outside of the limitations of time and space. And it talks about how, in its absolute most pure state of rest, physicists term this as the absolute. And there's various intervening dimensions between the absolute form of energy and our three-dimensional reality that the human consciousness can actually access. Okay, you following me here?
Yeah, I got ya.
All right. So it's basically saying the human consciousness can go into other dimensions and basically, it explains this is on page 13 through 14. The way it explains the absolute on pages 13 and 14 sounds a lot to me like the way a physicist would explain in a scientific way what I believe is God. And it talks about how the absolute occupies all dimensions, including all matter in the third dimension, without our physical ability to perceive it. And it's infinite consciousness, omnipotent, omniscient, eternal, and how all things are in a state of either coming from or returning to it. It's really fascinating stuff.
And when it talks about different consciousness and different dimensions here, a lot of people throughout history that have either studied it or have come up with theories on it, they believe certain things can help, such as binaural beats. And this is probably a podcast that we can talk about another day. But one of my favorite writers and favorite people I like to listen to is a man called Graham Hancock. And he talks about getting into alternate states by using certain natural products, let's just say, such as DMT or mushrooms. And they use those sort of things to help elevate them to another consciousness, another dimension. The Mayans, the Aztecs have a long history, especially when it comes down to shamanism, Peru's another one where they drink a substance called ayahuasca, and that helps them transcend, so to speak, into this other dimension, which is fascinating, which I think is a whole podcast on its own we can get into. But
Yeah,
very relative.
what's really interesting about this report is it is a combination of both a scientific and like a physics sort of analysis with things that we know that have been experienced at the human level for centuries through religious or even occult practices.
Mhm.
And from meditation and prayer and just worldwide. So there's a lot of things that when you're as you're reading this, you're like, okay, a lot of this actually makes sense. It's hard to because there's certain like preconceived notions, and we all come with our personal experiences. But when you're looking at it from just purely like a scientific perspective, there appears to be some physics involved here and some science actually involved to this as well. But they're talking about things that people who have practiced meditation or prayer or as used mind altering substances or whatever, they could say, yep, I know that you can have an out of body experience, right? Because some people have had those and they can say, yep, that's real.
Look,
Um,
for anyone listening, I'm never been a Boy Scout. Let's put it that way. So I can attest to a lot of these things, especially when I was younger. A lot of states that I have been into, and I've talked about this in previous podcasts. Uh, but I can very much relate to being or seeing a different existence that is in front of me. Like from what you view, from what you see, from going outside and looking at the trees, it's kind of like a peeled off layer.
yeah,
It's like a deeper layer than what we see just in the cognitive on the day to day.
right. And this report is exploring that is the other dimensions beyond time and space, the energy that is outside of time and space, and it's really interesting. So on page 16, it details out of body experiences achieved through the gateway process and how it's possible for the human consciousness to exist outside of the body and go to other dimensions beyond time and space. So you think about, say, for example, a vivid dream that you've had where it feels like that dream lasted for like hours or days, but in reality, it really only lasted a few minutes because the laws of time and space are different when you're in that dream state. So that's kind of how I imagine what these out of body experiences are like, where it is outside of the dimensions of time and space. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so out of body experiences, astral projection is another way that it is known. Uh, I've dug into this topic a bit, and uh, I see it as being separated into two fields. Astral projection is more something that you can actually kind of bring on yourself, which is an OBE experience. But I've found a few people uh, by researching this and by trying this that I've watched that I feel are very legit in what they're saying. And then I've found other videos of people that you're kind of just using this to elevate your status or your clout in some way. But
Mm-hmm.
I do feel that there's a lot of people out there that you know are able to do this, like in my belief. But then the other category, and there has been a few documentaries on this over the years, an OBE by accident. Now we've heard stories of a person getting into a car crash, and they've died in some sort of a way, or they've been on life support, or it's very serious, and those people have recounted standing over their body on the side of the road
Mm-hmm,
and,
mm-hmm.
and
Or
watching.
people that experience major trauma. And I think that this is where we get into the occult practices because, again, um, some of this knowledge and some of these practices have been used for nefarious purposes for centuries.
Oh yes.
And with the entire purpose of expanding consciousness, accessing all of these abilities that you should supposedly be able to access and everything, but they do it through trauma,
Mm.
right?
Well, it's funny that the CIA uh, commissioned a study on this, considering we know in the past, by past classified documents, that the CIA also worked on things like MK Ultra.
Exactly.
MK Ultra, breaking the mind, separating the mind into two forms of reality, or two different beings.
Or multiple different
Multiple.
beings. Yeah. Or consciousnesses, I should say. But
I wouldn't describe it, but yeah.
yeah, so on page 18, there's a diagram that I kind of want to show. Yeah, because it kind of gives you a visual as I'm describing it. But so this diagram, it talks about the flow of all energy and time space coming from the nucleus, which is the absolute, and going back to the nucleus. And it goes on to explain how the human consciousness is capable of not only existing outside of the human body and accessing these other dimensions beyond time space, but is able to access both past and future. I mean, pretty crazy stuff.
Pretty crazy stuff, man. It's like we said at the start. Whether you believe this or not, we're just talking about the topics and our own aspects and our beliefs on it. But let's just say, for the sake of the video, that this is possible. You can see how it can definitely be turned into an evil agenda, how they can use these sort of things. I mean, you can kind of put it as a form of sort of black magic, right?
Right.
If you can astral project or OBE on purpose, purposefully to spy on nations, to spy on
Hmm.
people, to uncover things, uh, ancient knowledge, even say, on different planes of existence or consciousness. It can definitely be used in a negative light, and in my personal belief, it has, in ways, by
Exactly.
people.
Right. Right.
This is
So,
the occult alchemy hermetics side of this.
exactly. And so this report on page 19, um, and also towards the end of the document, it talks about encountering other forms of consciousness within the universe while you're in that out of body state. And it also refers to them as intelligences in other dimensions. And it gives precautions about conscious entities possessing lower energy levels. And it even talks about ways of repelling those entities. So, the way that I interpret these conscious entities would be what I refer to as angels and demons.
I knew you were
And
gonna go there. I knew it.
of course,
I knew it.
it's actually referring to and confirming the existence of these entities in other dimensions.
Mhm. So think about something like a stigmata or a possession, and we've seen videos of this over the year where a person seems to change. They they start talking in tongues, they start moving weirdly. I mean, possession, whether you call it demon possession or this other consciousness possession, I think is something that is very real.
I do too. And this report is confirming that. Um, So it goes on to actually talk about a step-by-step method of the gateway process and the benefits and objectives that it could be used for. Like, and this is on pages 22 through 24, like problem solving to gain insight into personal difficulties, manifesting intention into physical reality, healing the body, remote viewing, out of body movement, and observing the past and future. And the report explains how these methods could be exploited for military or intelligence applications. Like, of course, you had mentioned spying, intelligence gathering, reconnaissance, healing the body rapidly, all of those things. And so, obviously, this is why the CIA was interested in commissioning a study like this, was to see how they could exploit this, if there's a
Well,
legitimacy to it, and if they could exploit it.
well, we'll take this for an example. How beneficial would it be if someone could use this state of consciousness to see one day into the future? So think about how beneficial that would be in a war situation.
Exactly. Exactly. So, but what's interesting is if you go to page 26,
Page 26.
yeah, okay. What's interesting is how on the bottom of that page, which is actually, it's actually marked 24. So scroll down. I want to see if it's marked page 24.
Oh,
No, it's page 26, but if you scroll down that page, yeah, see how it's marked 24? Okay, that's only because there were a couple of pages at the front that were like a letter. So, but this page, 24, it's talking about how these studies that they conducted on consciousness, physics, and the universe, how they coincide with ancient cultures and also with religions. And it draws comparisons of, say, the physicist's description of the absolute with our descriptions of God. But what makes this part even more intriguing is that the paragraph cuts off at the end there and presumably continues on the next page, which would be 25, with marked 25 on the bottom. But
it doesn't.
that page is missing. Yeah. So, of course, I'm curious as to why that
Of,
was left out of
of,
the declassified.
of course, you would peek that out. Of course, if anyone was to find that, it would definitely.
Yeah, so I'm wondering why that page is missing, especially considering the context of what they were talking about there and what information was contained on page 25. So I guess I'll have to leave that for you as the viewers and the listeners to make a comment what you think was on page 25. But if you go to page 27, actually, you're on page 27 there. So they're talking about this is in the end the conclusions drawn from this study conducted by the Army, commissioned by the CIA. And I'm just going to read it off. It says, there is a sound, rational basis in terms of physical science parameters for considering Gateway to be plausible in terms of its essential objectives. So they found that this gateway process had some merit to it. And not only that, but they suggested a phased approach for establishing an organization-wide exploitation of its potential. I'm assuming organization-wide would be like CIA-wide exploitation of its potential. So that's pretty interesting.
And who says they hadn't? Who says they haven't?
Exactly. Exactly. We don't know if further studies were commissioned or if its potential was exploited at an organization-wide level, but you have to consider this study was taking place in the 80s. Imagine how far they could have taken this research by now in 2021.
And I also think there is kind of a hiding in plain sight view to all this, because this was kind of dropped in 2003, and a few years later we started this new age trend of what some people call enlightenment, which is honestly 90% filled with frauds. There is a lot of people in there that are really good at what they do and are actually, I believe, very in tune with this sort of stuff, but they are a needle in a haystack.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you have to sift through and a lot of discernment needed, I would say,
Discernment, 100%.
navigated throughout this because a lot of misinformation, disinformation. And again, that's why we're not passing judgment here. We're just reading through this report and passing it on to you, the viewers and listeners, to see what you think. If you think it has merit, if you think it's total nonsense. But what I think about this is that, this information, assuming for a moment that it's all true, has been largely suppressed from the general population. Meanwhile, we're as a society being led further and further away from faith and spirituality and more towards this secular society, that left-sided brain way of thinking, using logic, not intuition. And they're always saying trust the science, even though of course their science a lot of the times is without logic and reason.
But
But that's beside the point.
when they say trust the science, it's only the science that they want you to listen to. There's plenty of scientists that disagree with other scientists.
Right. But the question is, why are we being led away from our intuition, our connection with God, our spirituality? And I think it's because they absolutely know the power of that we have with it. And their system of control will not work if we realize that power.
And I also think that is why there is a lot of fraud in this industry to lead people away and kind of get them lost in this maze of, I'm buying these books, I'm watching these videos, I'm enlightening myself, but at the same time, they're really getting more lost in the labyrinth of, what's real and what's not. And that's, like you said before, discernment is a massively beneficial here. I mean, you can look at things like that came out, things like The Secret, for example, and I think we've all heard about that. That that book, that you can call it a program really, because it is more of a self-help program that was pushed on Oprah and pushed on all these things. Where if you just think positive, positive things will come to you. I mean, that's the basis of it. But in reality, uh, that whole belief system is very fallible, infallible in the sense that, if you say, I'm thinking about good things and bad things are happening, why is that still happening? You'll see these gurus or these self-help people come back with, well, you're not doing it hard enough, or you're not doing it, in this sort of a way. So there's always a way around why it's not working. And those are the things I've noticed with self-help people, is that it's never the fault of the actual program, it's the fault of the person. So watch
Right.
out watch out for those sort of things.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the whole point is that with something like this, that it's easily exploited, right? And like the CIA is obviously trying to exploit it for their own purposes. It's not for the purposes of expanding the consciousness of
Mm,
humans on Earth. No, it's used to, it was, the study was done for the purposes of exploiting it. And I think they want to keep this kind of knowledge, if it assuming this is all true and has merit to it, but they would want to keep this knowledge for themselves, bastardize it, exploit it, weaponize it, so they
monetize it.
can, yes, they can use this power for their own gains, right?
100%. But having said that, also, I do feel that something like this, even on a smaller level, when it comes to a state of consciousness, which is helping yourself to be the best person you can be, and using these experiences, whether they are enlightening to your conscious or you're finding a way to derive more energy from the universe around you, because we're heavily medicated on this sort of it's a manufactured sort of energy. I mean, look at caffeine, energy drinks, coffee, like things like that that are meant to kind of bring us up and then make us crash, instead of getting this universe, getting this energy from the universe itself. And I believe there's 100% merit in positively finding a way to harness that to empower yourself so you can empower the world.
Well said. And what I want to do is ask the viewers a few questions, and then I'll answer it and say what I think, and then throw it to you, speaker, and
Sure.
see what you think, okay? So I'm interested to know what the viewers think on these findings in this report, if they have merit or if they think it's nonsense. I'm interested to know, do the findings of these or the methods, do they conflict with your religious or your spiritual beliefs, or do they confirm them? And what do you think about the CIA commissioning a study like this? So personally, I mean, I can't speak to the methods they use in this method, or in this study, but I definitely have apprehensions, not because I don't think that the method works. I think it probably does. But my apprehensions are that about 3 times in this report, they talk about encountering intelligent entities in other dimensions. And they even make suggestions on how to repel them, um, the ones that are evil, and or what they refer to are lower vibration entities. So those are my definite apprehensions. But the findings do confirm things that I already know to be true and that I believe, that the existence of God, the existence of our souls, and that we are more than just this body that our souls live on. It confirms the existence of what I believe to be our angels and demons, and it confirms that we have the power through prayer, meditation, connection with the Creator. So, what do you think, speaker? Do you think the report has merit, or it's a bunch of nonsense?
I think there's some merit in there, definitely. And you know my belief system with this sort of stuff. But for the viewers, I very much so believe in this sort of consciousness and these sort of techniques and methods, especially things like astral projection and reaching different states of consciousness in different planes of consciousness. Um, but like I said before, discernment is really important. But the thing that I think we should all kind of take away from this is, if you do believe this, especially things like astral projection and OBE, those sort of things, once you go through an experience like that, or you've had an out of body experience, that can really define how you see your life or how you see what you actually are. Because something like that is confirmation that you are not just this physical being in a meat suit. You're a spiritual being having a human experience. And I think something like that can be extremely powerful and beneficial, whether it is whether you're a religious person or whether you're not. Something like that can really enhance you yourself, what you can do, what you believe you can do, and how you can use such an experience to help those around you.
Well, I definitely do believe that we are spiritual beings and that we're way more powerful than we even know. And in ways, this report definitely confirms that. And so just remember that. Remember that no matter how much we get beaten down on the day to day, how much we're led to feel that we're nothing, or that we're um, controlled, that we're slaves, just know um, that we're much more than we even realize that we are. So,
And and that's the huge positive takeaway. I mean, once you can connect with this higher consciousness, this higher, you can find yourself doing things and projecting things. And there's definitely people that, I'll use Graham Hancock again as another example, that has had these sort of experiences and has used it in a scientific way to break barriers and to inform people, to teach people. And with him having that experience, I'm sure he's inspired a lot of people to do the same or to do positive things on this planet. And I think we're at a stage now where we need more people trying to, do this, or trying to find their true strength, because we need it now more than ever, especially at this time in history.
Yeah, it just confirms for me because, I'm looking through the lens of a Christian, and that's my faith, and I will never abandon that faith. So, I'm not going to speak to the methods of this gateway process. I'm just simply speaking to the confirmation that we are spiritual beings that are much more than just a human body. But to me, there is a scientific way of looking at this and confirming that, even through the power of prayer or meditation, we can manifest things on this planet. Like, we have more power than we realize. So that's how I look at it. That's my takeaway from it. And I think everybody, when reading this, is going to have a different takeaway from it, or will completely reject it. And that's fine too, because I understand this is something that may conflict with some people's belief systems. So, but that's why we're leaving it up to you, just letting you know about this report, what the findings were. We thought it was an interesting topic to talk about. And so we just want to thank you guys for joining us here today on Hive Mind. Check the link in the description for our website. On the social tab, you'll find us and find all of the platforms that we're on. We're on BitChute, Foxhole, and Pilled. To all of our PayPal and Patreon supporters, we want to thank you guys for keeping this channel going. We love you all, and we'll see you back next time right here on Hive Mind.
Stay ravenous.